They're basically saying, hey, therapists, come in and teach us how to do what you do so we can replace you. And I think like, oh, this is diabolical. How are you taking my deepest stories and deepest lived experiences and putting them into somewhere that is using this like robot generated intelligence? No, the amount of times the words narcissist or bipolar or borderline personality are thrown out there for people who are either A, just jerks, because you can't automate humanity, no matter what. Welcome to Winter in the Weeds, the show where we talk about surviving and thriving in life around all of the finding wonder in and amongst all of the weeds of change and reinvention and grief and all of the stuff that happens on a day-to-day basis in our lives. So I'm your host, Christy Ritz-King, and I am excited to be here with you and my dogs. As you can see, if you're watching the show, I've got one sleeping golden next to me. You can't see the other one asleep right next to him. And then the third one might run in at any moment. You never know. So this week's weeds, today's weeds, this show's weeds, the stuff that I want to talk about that's really I'm going to try not to make it a rant, is the sort of, I don't want to call it malpractice, but sort of the manipulation of mental health. And this could be like a 10-part series, but I'm just going to talk about what's come up recently. And don't worry, not with any of my clients or anybody that I work with, but just like talking to friends and seeing things on social media and what's in my email inbox as a therapist. Two things have happened recently. One is maybe the most disturbing. I am getting two things. I'm getting consistently pushed from my electronic health record software, like the thing I use to keep track of everybody's information. They would really like me to use their AI note-taking service. I'm sure they would probably charge extra for it, which is why they really want me to use it. And I have never been more resistant to something in my entire life. I just think, first of all, I don't happen to think notes are onerous like some people do. So if you work in any kind of facility or practice or anything that like someone else is checking the records and checking the notes, then notes can be really onerous and can be heavy. And look, I don't love them. They're kind of a pain in the neck for me too, but I have never been one who has found them like impossible to do. But I also don't overthink them. I think a lot of times you can get into people's like fear with note taking of like, oh, the man is watching me or somebody's going to come get me. And so it has to be perfect and everything has to be, especially if you're a young therapist, I think you get really hung up on notes as if they're an assignment of some kind and like someone's going to judge you and grade you on them. So I'm saying this to say like, I've never been one that's like looking to get out of note taking. Like I'm trying to find some easier, better way to do it, or that I don't believe in my own abilities enough to just write them myself. I need some computer program. Anyway, I'm not looking for like tools to make it easier or better or whatever. I have enough confidence in my own abilities to just write my own notes. So that said, when the company's pushing AI notes, not only do I not need it, but the thought of that is really terrifying to me because my understanding of learned language model AI is that they're basically learning from you. Like you are writing the things and then and by you, I mean all of us who are contributing on this software are writing our notes, and AI is learning from those notes how to then recreate notes for you, like how to auto populate and what words to use and how to write things in there. And not only do I feel like, well, that just takes the therapist out of it, but also that feels scary to me. Like who has access then to the notes on these, what are supposed to be like private patients? Like I didn't trust this stuff before. And now, especially under this administration, with what we've seen, some of the manipulation in this country, at least with these AI things, I don't trust it at all to not be like scraping private information and leaking private information and giving access to private information. So the fact that a friend called, it was like maybe a month or so ago. And actually now I'm not even remembering if they called me specifically or if it was like a question over social media that was basically like, how do you feel about my therapist asking me if they can have their laptop in front of them so that AI can help them take notes? Yeah, I feel a certain way about that. I think, first of all, your laptop in front of you while someone's trying to talk to you. If that were my therapist, I would be offended. I would be like, why are you, and not because I think they're doing this, but like just screens in front of somebody, whether it's a laptop or a phone or an iPad, screens in front of someone when I'm talking to them is triggering for me. I'm like, you can't possibly be paying attention to me if you have this screen in your face and you're doing something else other than just listening. So that's a me problem to some degree, but also I just feel like therapeutically, how is it possible for you to really be actively listening and typing away on your computer or writing on your iPad or, whatever, your tablet? I don't know. There feels like there's that puts a disconnect between you and the client. That makes me, I don't know. It makes me uncomfortable. I don't love it. So there's that problem. So let me be clear. I think a therapeutic intake or like an intake at a hospital or something where you're getting a ton of personal information and like you're taking a history and you're getting the biopsychosocial and you're asking a lot of questions. Totally understand why that would warrant a laptop or a tablet or a good old fashioned clipboard and paper. But like regular everyday sessions, the way that I work anyway, I'm not taking notes actively while the person is talking to me for two reasons. One, the first part that I said, which is like, if I'm the client, I'm like more fixated on what they're writing than I am on what I'm talking about. It just feels like it's setting the person up for it to be slightly judgmental. Now, what I do is the minute they're out of my office, I'm frantically writing like a few key phrases and words so that when I go back later to do my notes, I have some stuff in there that I won't remember 6 clients later or whatever, 3 clients later, even a client later, I'm not going to remember. So I write down sort of some key phrases and things in a notebook that I then will transfer into the eNotes and then, shred those papers. But during the session, I've never been one to write while they're talking unless it's an intake. And even then I explain to them like, hey, here's what I have here. I have these forms in front of me. I'm going to fill in some answers. I'm going to jot some things down. I'm not going to take copious notes and I'm not going to, if this bothers you, let me know because I want you to know I'm connected and listening. So that's number one of why I don't do it is like, I feel like it's this barrier in between. But then the AI part of it, like, so you have your laptop open and you're typing into this program that uses AI to generate notes. How is that private? How are you taking my deepest stories and deepest lived experiences and putting them into somewhere that is using this like robot generated intelligence to manipulate it into a note? It just doesn't feel therapeutic to me. And I could put a disclaimer in here of like, no judgment, because I do mean that. Like if a therapist finds that tool useful, great, I guess, no judgment. But I'd be lying if I said totally no judgment, because it feels a little bit judgmental for me to even say, how are we using AI in a therapeutic setting? That just feels wrong for note taking. But also then the second thing that's been happening to me is I've been getting all these LinkedIn job openings and they seem so intriguing that I keep clicking on them like a dummy. But then I realized pretty quickly that all they are is companies trying to hire therapists to feed their AI their language models. So basically like come in and be a therapist to our AI so that they can learn how to do your job essentially. And look, they pay really well. A couple of the jobs I've gotten are well over 6 figures. And, it seems pretty short term because once I think the AI learns your speak, then what are they going to do with you after that? And it's different. It's tech companies, it's insurance companies, it's all kinds of different places that are hiring for this. But they're basically saying, hey, therapists, come in and teach us how to do what you do so we can replace you. And I think like, oh, this is diabolical. Like you're going to pay me a good deal of money to basically put my colleagues and I out of business, or try to put my colleagues out of business. And at the very least, muddy the waters of who's what. The amount of people I've heard say, I asked ChatGPT this and they told me this, makes me want to pull my hair out, because ChatGPT is designed, and all these other ones, Grok and whatever the Google one is, I don't remember the names right now, but all of these large language model AIs, they're designed to tell you what you want to hear. I, as your therapist, am not going to tell you what you want to hear all the time. I'm going to help you see things a certain way, and I'm going to help you sort of guide your own thoughts and feelings in a certain direction that you want to be guided in. But I'm not going to tell you what you want to hear all the time. And that's all these things are doing. And while that's great in some ways, the more they learn what you like, the more you're going to get the same exact answers over and over and over again without any nuance or understanding of sort of the human condition. So like, we can train these things in a whole bunch of really cool things. Maybe like they'll create a great, monthly routine to lose 10 pounds, or a monthly routine to run a 5K, or a month. Like they'll do great things for you, but they're not going to be a great therapist if what you want is actual insight and understanding of the human condition. Because no matter how wonderful these models are, they're not humans, and they don't pick up on the nonverbal cues, and they're not assessing everything about your presence in the moment, and they're not hearing beyond the words that you're saying, which is what therapists are trained to do. More importantly, they're not asking you the questions that get you to the place that you want to be. Instead, they're just telling you stuff. And look, I know there's plenty of clients that come into my office asking for advice and wanting advice. And I too have sat on the other side of a therapist's couch and wanted them to just tell me what to do. Trust me, it's human nature to just be like, please just fix me. But that actually isn't effective therapy. And we are trained that way as students of therapy, that advice giving is not our job. And yet these AI models and these things people are going to on the internet for quote unquote advice, they're thinking, oh my gosh, they have such great insight. But really what they're just doing is like repeating back what they have learned you want to hear and what helps you clarify certain things. So, I said at the beginning of this, I'm going to try not to make this a rant, but it's just a really, I'm not afraid, I'm not like, oh, I'm afraid I'm going to be replaced, because no, like what I know about good therapy, I am 100% certain at this moment anyway, we cannot create computers to do that. We cannot create electronic, AI. Artificial intelligence is artificial and not human. And so therefore, I'm not afraid that it's going to replace me. That said, I'm not afraid it's going to replace me, because you can't automate humanity. No matter how intelligent the thing is, it's not a human. And so it doesn't have all of the capabilities that we as therapists have. And you can't train that into an automated thing. So I'm not afraid per se. I just put that in quotes for those of you listening and not watching. But what I am is a little frustrated that, one, therapists are falling for this stuff, that we are falling for needing it and it making our lives easier, and, taking these well-paying jobs to basically train it to replace us. So that's frustrating. But then also what's frustrating is that people are going to be, I don't want to say tricked, but people are going to be served in a way that doesn't ultimately benefit them. I'm not saying that there's not some use for it. And I'm not saying that like in those early days, it doesn't give great advice. But what I'm worried about is the sort of art and science of therapy is helping somebody come to change and growth that they want in their lives. If you're just feeding in a question and getting back an answer, that's not helping you get anywhere. It's band-aiding the immediate pain and discomfort, but it's not doing what needs to be done for long-lasting change. So if you want the answer to how do I send this email to my boss, or how do I navigate this divorce, or how do I answer this thing on the questionnaire, okay, I guess that helps immediately. But if without that sort of, well, again, I'm choosing my words really carefully, because I know that AI is marketed in such a way that I'm going to sound like I don't believe in any of it, or that I think there's no use to it. And I'm not really here to say that. What I was going to say is, without the pattern recognition that humans employ, and the reason I didn't say that is because I know that pattern recognition is a thing that we talk about with AI, with especially LLMs. There's a difference between sort of coded pattern recognition and human pattern recognition. And what I mean is when I have clients come into me and say like, here's the thing that's bothering me right in this moment. We kind of do two things. We like look back to say like, well, how do we think we got here? And have we seen this before? Have you seen it in any other instances? And also can you look back at other instances where that didn't happen or where you made a different choice or where you did things differently? And how do we compare and contrast those two things? So we're looking for patterns, but we're doing it collaboratively, and we're doing it with this sort of mission of like, how did we get here? And then how do we handle it when we come up against it again? And so, I always talk to my clients about how life is like a spiral, and you might face similar things, but you're now at a new level of this. And so what and how you're going to handle it is different, even though it might feel the same in the moment as it did before last time you encountered it. And I'm just not so sure AI is equipped to handle those types of things. So if I'm in an abusive relationship and I go into therapy to get out of the abusive relationship, well, the next time I'm in a relationship, I'm going to be looking for things that to keep me safe, but then also I'm going to need to learn like, well, what does a healthy relationship look like? And I'm not sure that AI is going to get that deep with you. What AI is going to do is say, oh, here's some red flags for an unhealthy relationship. And it's not going to take into consideration that some of that might be a trauma response. So for instance, if you're in an abusive relationship and you're used to sort of the high highs and the low lows of an abusive relationship, and then you get into a relationship that doesn't have those same high highs and low lows because it is a stable, relatively, whatever relationship, but you still feel triggered in some of those moments so that it's similar. And you ask AI, is this a red flag? And AI is judging that based on how you're feeling. Well, then it's going to tell you it's a red flag. Even though what it really is your trauma response to this thing that is actually normal in a relationship. And the reverse might be true too. It might downplay something that is actually should be a red flag, but you're so used to it in your life that it knows you, this AI knows you, and it knows your reaction and your response. And so it's going to base its answers on that. That's what I mean by it tells you what you want to hear. So as a therapist, as a human being, someone's going to come in and say, this thing is happening and I'm feeling a certain way about it. And we're going to be able to look at, well, are you feeling a certain way because the thing that's happening is enough to make you feel that way? Or are you feeling a certain way because this thing happened and it's similar to a traumatic thing that happened to you before? And so you're feeling as if it is a traumatic event, when in actuality, the thing itself isn't. Your reaction to it is based on past history. I'm trying very purposely to be vague because I never want somebody listening to this to be like, is she talking about me? Because that might happen in a lot of these instances because a lot of people come with a similar patterns because I see clients that come from similar places. So I hope that I'm making sense in this without saying anything too specific so that somebody listening is going, wait a minute, is she sharing my information? Because I'm not. I'm just talking sort of generally about when somebody does a certain thing, what I see as a human being sitting across from them or, sharing a screen versus what an AI LLM will hear. A large language model, which is trained on your language or on the language of the internet. So, it's going to look for pattern recognition, but only in a way that aggregated information shows them patterns, not that you in your life with your lived experience is fully going to do it. It doesn't take into consideration past trauma. It doesn't take into consideration attachment history. It doesn't take into consideration your coping mechanisms. It only knows what you tell it, and then it feeds you back what you want to hear based on what you've just told it. So you have to set all the parameters. And if we could set all the parameters in such a way that took into consideration all of those things I just said, your own trauma responses, your own insight, your own all of that, well then, yeah, we wouldn't need therapists. But none of us, myself included as a seasoned therapist, are 100% of the time recognizing all of those things about ourselves. We often need to process with another person in a safe and trusting relationship to be able to see the patterns and to be able to understand the coping skills and to be able to know what to do and where to go from it, to distinguish between trauma response and red flag. I always say to my clients, like, we're trying to move you from feeling unsafe to just being a regularly old annoyed in your relationship. Like, how can we tell the difference between this thing that this person does that's annoying and this thing that this person does that makes me unsafe? There's no AI that's going to be able to help you distinguish that. They're going to give you some generalities and they're going to be able to point out the obvious stuff, but they're not going to help you with your lived experience distinguish between the two. And that is what stresses me out, is that people are reliant on it because it does give you some good stuff. And so people go, oh, I don't need to go pay a therapist. I can just talk to ChatGPT. Or as a therapist, you go, well, I don't need to do all this work myself. This is going to help me do it. But what you don't realize is that you're feeding into the system. I'm going to get a lot of pushback on this. I know, because there's people out there who absolutely love this stuff. And I'm not saying there's not a place for it. I just question whether the place is in the therapy office or in the therapy backend office or anywhere where people's personal and private stories are available. I don't think it does have a place there. And if you do, I'd love for you to tell me why and convince me otherwise. But right now, my weeds this week are how much it has sort of infiltrated the mental health side of things. And the sort of second part of that, yes, it's not totally AI related. Some of it's human error related. But, we started with saying the weeds this week are the sort of manipulation of mental health. And I have heard now a number of stories of people being diagnosed either by a mental health professional or by the internet, being diagnosed with some big personality disorder or major mental health issue based on a couple bullet point, behaviors. And that is really concerning to me for a number of reasons. If it's coming from an actual professional, it's concerning to me because I think, how in the world are you diagnosing somebody without weeks of assessment and conversation? And if it's coming from the internet, I think everybody's got something. If you just are looking at TikTok and Instagram and I saw something yesterday that said if it's ADD, or is it just being able to take anything I say and turning it into a song? Look, I am 100%. It's kind of ironic that my dogs are sitting with me because I'm 100% the person who sings nearly everything in my life. My mother was somebody who sang nearly everything in her life. Do either of us have ADD? Not to my knowledge. Are there things in my life that I do that I sometimes think, oof, do I have ADD? 100%. But I have never been formally diagnosed with it. And not because I haven't gone to see if I am, but because I don't actually meet all the criteria for a diagnosis. And because some of the behaviors that I exhibit are either due to something else or are just part of who I am. And I have to learn ways to cope with it. Same, the amount of times the words narcissist or bipolar or borderline personality are thrown out there for people who are either A, just jerks sometimes, or B, have a history of trauma that would make them seem like they could have one of these personality disorders and or some other OCD or anxiety or whatever, ADD, is frequent. And I see on the internet this oversimplification of stuff of hey, do you do this thing? Well, then you might have this. No, it reminds me of Psychology 101. It's a class that a lot of people take in college as undergrads, even if they have no interest in psychology. And it inevitably, you come out of that class pretty sure you have one of 5 disorders. You're convinced because you read all the diagnostic criteria and you see all these things and you are like, oh, I do that. I've done that. I do that. And yeah, we all do. We all have a little bit of, obsessiveness sometimes, or a need for, order in our lives that feels obsessive sometimes, or, we have a compulsive behavior that we feel like, oh yeah, in looking back on it, I always have to do that. Well, that's not the same thing as a true obsessive compulsive disorder. We all get anxious about certain things. Maybe we're afraid of heights. Maybe we don't like speaking in public. Maybe we don't like airplanes, whatever. We all have a little bit of that. It doesn't mean we all have generalized anxiety disorder. We all can be narcissistic at times. We all can be self-centered. We all can only think of ourselves. We all can have trouble accessing our empathy. That doesn't mean that we're narcissistic. I always tell my clients, if you're coming into me telling me you think you might be narcissistic, you're definitely not narcissistic. Because you wouldn't think that if you were. So this sort of oversimplification, the overdiagnosis, both in offices, but also on the internet, and doing it to ourselves is so frustrating to me. And I can totally understand now medical doctors who like hate Google, because while I think it's wonderful and empowering that we are able to go and access information that can help us advocate for ourselves, and I'm not discouraging that behavior. I think absolutely walk into your doctor and say, I notice X, Y, and Z, and walk into your therapist's office and say, I notice X, Y, and Z, and I saw this TikTok that said blah, blah, blah. Okay, I'm happy to have that information and process that with you and talk about that with you. What I don't want is you giving yourself a diagnosis, or God forbid, an actual therapist or psychiatrist or psychologist giving you a diagnosis based on one interaction or a bulleted list or a criteria you brought from the internet. That's the part that this week, really this like last, 3 or 4 months, I've just noticed an inundation of it has really made me want to scream. And I'm going to add one other thing on there, because I talk about myself as a trauma therapist all the time. We say the word trauma now everywhere all the time, especially lately in this country, because there is this low level trauma happening. And I say low level, not that things aren't in a crisis, but that low level meaning like every day, all day, there's this crisis happening, especially, Minneapolitans. If you live in Minneapolis, St. Paul, the Twin Cities area, you have definitely had low level anxiety, probably since 2020, if we're all being honest. But the word has gotten watered down, and it's gotten misconstrued in that things that are true trauma responses are often misdiagnosed as some sort of personality disorder, or they're overlooked as something else, or we just kind of assume now, okay, well, we've all been traumatized, so we're all going to have trauma responses in our life. And that's not the end of the story. That's why you go to therapy, is to not just heal from the trauma, meaning you stop using those same coping skills because they're no longer working. We develop these strategies and these coping mechanisms in trauma situations for survival, and they work. No shade to them. They work. The problem comes when weeks, days, weeks, months later, years later, we're still relying on those same coping mechanisms, and they're not working anymore because we're no longer in that unsafe situation. And moreover, we have a hard time then understanding what the safe and unsafe situations are, because we're still relying on old information and old stories. That's why you go to therapy. And that's the part that AI is never going to totally understand, is how to disentangle your today experiences from stuff from the past that has been traumatizing. I'll leave you with this. My oldest went to the dentist the other day. She had to have some teeth filled. And when she was like, 6 or 7, maybe, she had to have some teeth extracted. The kid's mouth was a disaster from birth. It was too small. She had too many teeth. They were all on top of each other. So I want to say, like, she might have been a little older. So let's say 8 years old. She had to have some teeth extracted. And they tried to put first of all, they didn't let me go back there with her, which now looking back on it, I'm like, that was dumb of them. My understanding, because I wasn't back there for all of it, but they came out to me and they were like, you need to come in here. She won't let us do the work. And I was like, whatever. There's a story for another day about how annoyed I was. But long story short, they tried to put the mask over her, the happy gas mask over her face to just put her out for a little bit so they could give her the needles, because they were afraid she would freak out about the needles, because needles are scary. So they tried to do the happy stuff, the nitrous. And she freaked out about the mask. She didn't like it on her face. She didn't like it. She felt like claustrophobic. She basically had a little panic attack as an 8-year-old, and, tried to rip it off and tried to sort of fight the nurses and everything. Fast forward to 23. Anyway, that story's like family legend, because she did that. She ended up being like, I'll do it, but I don't want that mask. So she ended up just like white knuckling it through the needles being poked into her. They didn't even have numbing gel. They just jammed these needles in and Novocained her up. So that's become sort of family legend as her being this like, tough guy that through dental procedures. We go the rest of her life. She's fine. She's years of orthodontia. She's fine. She's never had any issues. He's super calm with her. The dentist is super calm. I'm not sure she ever had any fillings. I don't remember, but no issues. She's 23 years old. She goes to have her tooth, she goes to the dentist. He tells her she needs to have some cavities filled. She spends like 3 days in a mild panic about the dentist. And then she goes, and then she tells me afterward. So I guess I have some like phobias of the dentist. I don't really know why, but like I freaked out a little bit when I was in the chair and I started sweating a little and I started, all of these sort of physical trauma responses. And she's like, I don't really understand why. And I was like, you don't understand why? Like last time you were in a dental chair for a procedure like this, you were completely traumatized. You ripped the mask off your face and had a full-blown panic attack. Like you thought you were going to die in the chair at 8 with this thing happening. Of course, you have some residual stuff left over when you go into a similar situation with a similar environment, a similar environment with similar feelings. Of course, you're going to freak out a little bit. So, but it was so funny that she's like, talking to her trauma therapist mom and is like, I don't know why I would feel this way. And I'm like, don't you remember this thing we talk about all the time happened to you? But that's what I mean by pattern recognition. Like AI wouldn't know to say to her, yes, you had a traumatic experience. Now, going forward, what I might recommend to her is like a little visualization and a little bit of, if she had a therapist, I'd suggest some EMDR around the dental chair so that she didn't have the same trauma responses, because clearly underneath there is a feeling that she's not safe in the dentist chair. And we need to figure out how to make it so that that is either lessened or completely gone next time she goes for a procedure. That's not a thing I think AI is going to be able to do. So this is why I'm frustrated this week. These are the weeds this week. They're fully mental health related, and they are just, again, the like manipulation and oversimplification of mental health and trauma and how people manage both. So that's all I got. If you have any solutions for me, or if you want to convince me that AI is actually the wave of the future, then let me know. Okay, so wonder. After the weeds, let's talk about the wonder this week. And it's kind of a nebulous one, but it has a little bit to do with mental health too. I've seen both some videos and also some real life experiences. I had friends visit the cities a little while back, and we were out with their kids, and the kids are, I have watched their kids grow, and I have watched these parents just parent these kids beautifully in a way that they really know their kids, and they know their strengths, and they know what they need, and they know all of those things. And it's just been really lovely to witness. And I've also seen some things online too recently. So that has just been front and center for me. The wonder of parents who really pay attention to who their children are and accept them and love them and give them space to be exactly who they are in all ways. That's just a beautiful thing to witness. And I feel really honored that I've gotten to see it in person and online and in multiple situations recently. So that's the wonder this week, is parents who get it and who get their kids and give them the grace to be exactly who they are whenever and however that looks. And then I'll end with our what are you reading, watching, and listening to this week. We started doing this on the XYZ segments with Faith and I really love it. It's a fun thing to do. So I'm going to recommend maybe a book, maybe a TV show, maybe a movie, maybe some new music that I'm listening to, or if we've just been to something recently. Or also, like, I'm into lately this sort of reinvention of, I love a reinvention. If you've been around with me for a while, I love a reinvention. But, as a 50-something-year-old woman, what makeup am I wearing? What clothes am I wearing? What skincare am I using? Things like that. I've been sort of examining and trying out a bunch of new stuff. So I'm just going to bring you what I'm loving every week from now on. So this is that segment where what are you reading, watching, listening to, or using on your face? This week I want to talk about a book by Abby Jimenez, who is actually Minnesota author. I didn't really know that before I moved out here. I read all her books, but I kind of only vaguely knew that they were set here and didn't really know she was actually like physically here and her store is here and everything else. I like her. They're romance. I would describe them as romance novels, but they're really I don't want to say well written, because I think all the romance I read is well written, but they're really like character driven romance novels. And one of the things she does really well, and I actually went on another podcast to talk about this, is she writes human stories well, meaning they're often flawed. They sometimes have actual mental health issues that they're dealing with. There's definitely family attachment trauma stuff that's in them. She just writes that well without it being sort of too heavy to enjoy the book. She's good at that. She's really good at sort of the full scope of humanity. And so this book called The Night We Met is like a supercharged in that way, because the story itself is wrought with the romance itself is wrought with like, this is wrong. Like I spent a lot of the book being like, ooh, I am deeply uncomfortable with this relationship. And somehow she managed to wrap it up at the end in a way that was satisfying. I was really worried. I was like, I don't know where this is going, but I appreciate her efforts. And then I really appreciated the end. She did a nice job at the end, sort of not tying it up all neatly with a bow, but doing a nice job of giving everybody their closure that they needed. So it's called The Night We Met, and it's Abby Jimenez. As far as watching, I'm in the same sort of, I feel like I'm watching on TV all the same things everybody's watching. So I haven't really been talking much about it lately, but we did see a movie called, Is This Thing On? Over Christmas, I think, because I watched it with both of my college kids were home. So it must have been over the Christmas holiday break. And it's Will Arnett, which I'm sure people have feelings about him. It is, and Laura Dern, who's phenomenal in it. If you're watching this video, you're looking at my curly hair right now, which when we saw that movie, my daughter was like, oh, you need Laura Dern's hair. That's what you need. Take that picture into the salon. It doesn't look like it, but it was the inspiration for it. It's, I think based on a true story of a guy who's like going through some problems in his relationship and ends up doing a stand-up open mic night, talking about his divorce and just sort of working on almost processing the stress of it all on stage. And what I appreciated about it was, again, it was this real life look at humanity and of like a mature relationship and a woman who was at the place in the relationship of like maybe rediscovering who she was outside of parenting and wifing and all of the things. And it's just a really great, they did a really nice job making everybody sort of the villain and the hero of their own story. So check that out. It's now streaming. That's why I'm bringing it up now, because I think it's streaming. Maybe Netflix. I can't remember actually, but it's somewhere on, if you just look up, Is This Thing On? It'll tell you where you can stream it. And then listening to, there hasn't been much new recently. I know there's new stuff coming out, so I'm excited to talk to you about that. But I've been sort of in an old school funk. So we went to, Bruce Springsteen was in Minneapolis. He started his tour, his little mini tour that I swear to you came only because of what's happening in the government right now. So he started it here in Minneapolis and we got tickets and went. And it was an incredible show. He's incredible anyway. He's like 76 years old and plays for like almost 4 hours and literally almost never stops. He'll like start counting off the next song while he's still finishing the first song. It's like nonstop music for 3.5 hours. Anyway, that's beside the point. I went to his concert. He was amazing. One of his, because we're in Minneapolis, one of his encore songs was Purple Rain. And, you know, it's Bruce, so his voice it is what it is. But the guitars, oh, it was incredible. So the guitars were Nils Lofgren and Tom Morello, because Tom Morello was a guest that night at the concert. And you like, it just got Prince back in my brain. I mean, I live in Minneapolis, so it's hard to not have Prince on the brain. But Prince is one of those artists where like, yes, I adore him and have all of the music that he probably ever produced, but I don't, he's not like on a regular, rotation in my house, but he has been lately. So Bruce and Prince have been on sort of regular rotation for me lately. And I'm just reminded of all of the incredible music from both of them that I enjoyed so much. And Bruce's like set list was different than normal. It was a lot of, resistance type music. So that was fun because it's not a lot of songs that I constantly listen to, or is a lot of songs that I happen to love, but that he doesn't really play in concert very much. So those two have been pretty heavy on my playlist lately. Bruce and Prince, icons, my two home icons, Jersey guy and Minnesota guy. So that's all I got this week. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. If you're watching on YouTube, we would love a review and a subscribe. If you are listening anywhere you get podcasts, then we would love a review there too, because it just helps people get it out more. And also a reminder that we're moving the show to Substack. So I have finally given in to Substack. It feels like it really speaks to my little blogger heart in that I can write. I've been a consumer of Substack for quite some time. But most of the people that I have on Substack that I subscribe to on Substack are like journalists, quite frankly. And so I kind of always felt like, oh, I can't really be here. But then more and more, I started noticing my old blogger friends on Substack because they're just writing their old long form stuff like we used to. And I talked to the guy that helps me with this show. And I was like, I really think I want to move over there. And he was like, well, you can move the podcast there too. And you can do live events. And the Women of Wonder community, I'm going to eventually move over to Substack as well. So I can house everything in one place and nobody has to have a separate phone app and you can just get it in your email inbox if you want. So I'd love to see you there. Come on over to Substack, subscribe. I have free. I don't have anything paid is going to be the Women of Wonder community right now. It's just free. So like and subscribe, write us a review. Come join us on Substack. We'd love to have you there. Thanks. Till next time. Keep looking for the wonder in the weeds.